Hello, G. Scott. Please tell me you're a genuine person with a genuine question. Hello. I think you're on mute. Oh, I can just about hear you.
Hold on a minute. Okay. Am I the only one that's here?
Yeah, I've had a succession of people come in who I thought were genuine, and then it turned out they were trolls. So
Oh, that's a pity.
yeah. So are you you're in Scotland? I can tell by your accent. So that's a start.
Wait a minute, I've lost you again.
Oh,
You
can you hear
still
me?
there?
Hello?
Oh,
Hello, can you hear me?
oh, I moved to a different screen. That's
Right.
okay. I can hear you. Right. Aye. I'm in Aberdeen.
Oh, hiya.
Where about you?
I live in Cumbernauld.
Oh, that's a shame. The
Was
land of roundabouts, eh? Um,
Yeah, it does have a lot of roundabouts.
yeah, I had to find a house in Cumbernauld once
Uh,
about 30 years ago. And I've negotiated about 15 roundabouts,
uh-huh.
and I eventually gave up. And I ended up in a place called Steps,
Uh-huh.
and that's close by, isn't it?
Well, it's relatively close, yeah.
Uh, I stopped by there and I spoke to a policeman. And he says, you're out your way a wee bit, son. And he gave me directions, but I still never found that bloody house. But every house looked the same. Yeah, they're like upside down houses. The sort of living room is upstairs and the bedroom is downstairs.
Uh-huh.
Is that right? Aye, that's what I was told to find. Anyway,
Okay.
what's your blog about now? What you doing? What's your
Oh, well, I was hoping to get people on who were, interested in asking questions. My blog is about Scottish politics. I'm
aye?
I'm currently standing in an internal election for the Alba Party. Have you heard of the
Uh,
Alba Party?
I'm a founder member of Alba.
Oh,
Aye.
right, we're getting somewhere. This is excellent. Right.
Founder member. I joined Alba the same day that it was announced.
Yeah, well, you got in quicker than I did then, because I took maybe a few days to. Well, I can't remember how long it took me, but it took a little while for me to actually make the plunge. Because I mean, I was an SNP member at the time, so yeah, it was a bit of a psychological thing. But I was pretty sure I wanted to join.
I was SNP for 50 years
Uh-huh.
before I changed. I just gave up eventually. I just gave up. But I write a blog myself.
All right. What's it called?
Calton Jock is my
Ah,
blog.
I've heard of you. All right, right. Well, my
I,
blog is Scott Goes Pop. Tell me you've heard of me.
I've seen your blogs. Yeah,
Oh,
I've
this
seen
is
it.
excellent. Right. I can't believe it.
Uh,
I've been sitting here for half an hour and I've actually got a genuine person. This is excellent news.
Calton. I'm writing up at the moment blogs on or a blog on that Joe Farrell,
Uh-huh.
the new Police Scotland. I don't even have you seen it. I just posted it yesterday. I think it was and it's been attracting a fair bit of attention. I don't think people are too enamored with her at all. What she's been up to. So my blog will be a very long one because her history is should we say interesting.
Uh-huh.
She's certainly not what she appears to be, and I don't think she's going to last very long. I think because I don't think the Scottish Police Authority are going to last very long either.
Uh-huh.
I think that depending how things go, they may well revert back to the regional system because the centralisation system is becoming too expensive,
Yeah.
too cumbersome, but that was the reason, of course, that the boy resigned. That he was called to a meeting in Holyrood and told that he had to get his act together in terms of the pay award and the salaries. It was all out of control, and they were looking at cutting like up 1,500 jobs. And he said, "Well, he said that's no for me," and he resigned that day. He actually resigned. He walked out of the office and said, "You've got my termination. I'm not party to that. I built this bloody organisation. Now you want me to take it apart?" And then I can't remember who it was. Who was it interviewed him? But he came out that day and out that afternoon and made his announcement on national television. He said, "I'm out." And 3 months later, of course, she's gone. And now left with this lassie's coming. But her track record is very interesting. The first thing that she did, of course, is she brought in one of her colleagues from Durham, who's known locally in Durham as the Slasher. And he's one of these finance guys in terms of the police who moves in and suggests ways of cutting costs.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure what authority she had to do that, because that was something that she did within the first week of her appointment. She brought this guy in from Durham, the assistant, I think he's assistant chief or assistant something or other, and a very close colleague of her, and helped her to restructure Durham, not without its problems, um, and saved a lot of money, sort of thing. So that's why he's there. But I'm just wondering, where did she get the authority? Does she have the authority to bring in someone from a different country, from a different organisation, to examine the books of her organisation after only a few days, perhaps without consulting colleagues within Scotland? You know?
Yeah.
I've asked that question, but I haven't had an answer yet, so I'm just waiting for that to come up. Because it will come up, because I'll just keep asking the question: who gave you authority? And of course, she's the woman that that day, the storms in Scotland that took the driver off his duty. There were only 2 drivers in the whole of Scotland on traffic patrol at that time, and she took one of them and said, "Take me to my home." And he had to drive her all the way to bloody Northumberland when he was on duty. And storms were raging at 19 mile and 100 mile an hour, winds blowing, trees blowing, people getting flooded out. And she's getting the boy, and the passenger in the car with her was that guy, the assistant. That was the guy who was with her. So, but I don't know, did he go home? He went home to Gateshead. She went home to Northumbria. So she was dropped off first, and he went home to Gateshead. And the poor bloody driver had to drive all the way back to Edinburgh in that weather on his bloody Jack Todd. For me, that's placing the guy life in the limbo, did. I mean, the blood was bloody. What's she doing? That's a shame. That not only that, she said to him, "I need you in a hurry." So when he was wherever he was in the Lothians at the time, if he switched his blue light on and flashed a blue light to get to her at Waverley Station to take her south. So, and she was caught out because one of her colleagues in Scotland leaked the information to the press. And of course, that's what that was. And she then had to say, "Oh, I do apologise. It was an error of judgment, some bloody error of judgment within 9 days of taking up post." So not a very good start. And it's one for me that there's a lot more questions that have to be asked about that incident that haven't yet been asked, but need to be asked and answered. The other thing that gets me about Jo Farrell is that who the hell is she? Because she didn't exist before 2002. When in 2002 she came up somewhere from Cambridgeshire and took up a post of a chief superintendent or something. And from that time she just gained promotions.
Yeah.
And they say you promote mediocrity. In terms of Jo Farrell, her partner is a retired police officer. I don't know what rank, and she's got 3 children. 2 of the children are his, and 1 is hers. The question I've always said is her name Mrs. Farrell, as it was when on one of the interviews that she did, or is it Miss Farrell? I can't find her birth. I can't find her existence in Cambridgeshire. I can't find her anywhere. So what I'm looking at is her name Farrell, or what is her maiden name? If I get her maiden name, I can then track down what her police record was in Cambridgeshire, because that's non-existent. She doesn't exist before 2002. Now it's important that for me, it's important to uncover who the hell she is. Where did she come from? Nothing known about her parents. I just say she was born in September 1968 in the Wirral, down in Liverpool. But I've checked all the sources I can. I can't find her because I'm looking for Farrell. So, but if Farrell's her married name, what's her maiden name? But if Farrell's her maiden name, Is she married? Just says it's her partner. Is she living in sin with this guy? Whose child? The two children that she's adopted, or she had as stepmother, they're his, clearly. So he's clearly been married before. What were the circumstances preceding the marriage? He was clearly a colleague. So what's the, well, is there an intrigue there? Am I looking for something that didn't exist? I don't think I am. I'm looking for something because I'm that a nosy person that needs answers to questions.
But what is it you suspect? I mean, what is it you are looking for?
I suspect did she come up from Cambridgeshire as Superintendent Farrell? Let's assume that's her maiden name, with a child. In other words, did she have the child with someone before she came to Northumberland?
But does that matter? I mean, is that relevant to what she does?
Of course it does. It matters to me because I don't know. And I'm one of these people that need to know who I'm looking at and where this woman's picking up £245,000 a year. I'm a taxpayer like yourself. £245 a year. Her total package for the year will probably come out about something like £800,000 a year. That's how much he's taken out the kitty. Because she gets big lump sum pension payments as well because of the short-term contract. Massive amounts of money. So if you're investing massive amounts of money in this person, and she's going to be taking the decision that she needs to be taking, and she's involving people from outside forces, and she's taking drivers out of their job to drive at bloody Northumberland, I need to be knowing much more about her. Plus the fact, if you actually look at her role, and I wrote an article about it last night about her role in the shooting of PC Rathband. I don't know if you've read that one, but you remember Rathband and Royal Moat, the guy that ran riot in Northumberland a few years back. No, the one that Paul
of course.
Gascoigne wanted to go fishing with him, right?
Yeah.
No, the whole can of worms. There's a 14-part podcast on that available. You can actually go and read it and listen to it online. But I listened to it at length in detail. I'm saying to myself, what's going on here? The family, Rathband hung himself, 18 months later, couldn't cope with the stress, couldn't cope with anything, blinded both eyes, lost everything, lost his career, lost his bloody marriage, couldn't cope, depression, hung himself. The family took Joe Farrell and Northumberland to court. Said, we want damages off of you because you let us down. You let him down. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, yes, you bloody did. And those stories, the stories you read in the press, I read the press, are all one of bloody bollocks. Because the story goes that he was sitting on his own in a car at 1 o'clock in the morning on a roadside stop-off on the A1. Moat crept up to him in the car, at the side of the car, pointed a shotgun at him and shot him in both eyes with both barrels, and blinded him. Now, I accepted that like everybody else accepted that, just a random, none of the sort. What happened was, Moat phoned the police 10 minutes before and told the police person that he was speaking to what he was going to do. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to settle the score. This was him having shot and killed the day before the lover of his ex-girlfriend and then shot his ex-girlfriend in both legs. He said to the police person, oh, I'm going to get any police officer that's ever been involved in my demise and my downfall. I'm going to get him. Police Constable Rathband arrested Moat 3 weeks before for carrying stolen goods in the back of his truck. Not for the first time they lifted them. So there was a record, there was history between Rathband and Moat. That's never come out until I posted it last night. Because what happened there, and a warning should have been given by the control officer who was in charge of the incident at that time. Guess who that was? Joe bloody Farrell. She was the incident officer. She was given all the relevant information. All she had to do was to issue an order to the control for the control to say over the wire, keep mobile. 2 words. Now, these are the 2 words that are uttered by the police when there's any incident such as attacks or stabbing. The vehicles are going to keep moving because they don't want the police sitting. She never issued that order. She said she was too busy. She had other things to do. Her admission to issue that, keep mobile, how long is that going to take you? Second, particularly as a warning had been given by Mott, I am going to get any police officer that's been involved with me in the past. I'm going to get him. The only officer that was on duty that night was PC Rathbard. He was the only one that was on duty. That affected, because he routinely and regularly patrolled the stretch of the A1 where Mott moved back and forward with his truck moving his funny goods. Yeah. So for me, the person that was responsible and should have taken responsibility was Farrell. She didn't. Now, you need to listen to the 14-part podcast to get the full story and make up your own mind. But I made up my mind. I wrote a blog about it. And hopefully people will read that and then say, who is this Jo Farrell? She's not this goody person, this person is decisive. She's not who she says she is. And I want to know, who are you? And
Is your fear that she's incompetent or that she's been appointed for the wrong reason, or what's your underlying concern?
Yeah. The 2 people that were shortlisted for the post were Jo Farrell and the existing guy, Malcolm something, the guy that's the deputy, been in post for a long year. People thought he was a shoo-in. But I dug out a bit of information and I actually looked at the job advert. The job advert that went out made it very clear they were looking for woke, someone that was woke.
Yeah.
They wanted a woke person in the job. The in-house candidate didn't stand a bloody chance, but he's not woke. Yeah.
Well, do we know that? I mean, is he
Yeah, you could check his record that he goes back 40 years with the force.
Right.
You know, he's a straightforward, up and down, old-fashioned policeman. Doesn't fit the bill. No, the SNP wanted a woke person in post. That was very clear by the advert. The very last sentence of the advert makes that very clear. So they got who they wanted. Now,
well, I suppose they didn't say we want a woke candidate. They must have phrased it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. They phrased it, someone in touch with your emotions and all these other.
All right, okay.
It was clear what they wanted. Yeah, they certainly the press knew who they wanted.
Are you concerned that she was brought in from outside Scotland? Is that part of your concern?
My concern is that my concern is that they brought in the wrong person.
Okay.
They brought in someone that was prepared to go along with whatever political dogma was pushed upon her by whatever. And the proof of that one is in the Beergate thing. You know what the Beergate?
Refresh my memory.
Beergate was Starmer. Remember the coup-ha 2 years ago? It was Starmer and Rayner. They went up to Durham and they were pictured on videotape and other things, participating in beer and bloody hamburgers or something. And that was at the time of the ruthless lockdown on COVID. Nobody had to do anything. I couldn't even sit in a bloody back garden for it. That was the instruction. They were caught with their bloody pants down, consuming beer. Not only that, at that time, also at that place, there was, guess who? The Assistant Chief Constable, the guy that's coming up to Scotland to help to look at the finances. He'd gone through the books. He was there with Starmer and Rayner. That was investigated by Jo Farrell. Oh yeah, there's no case to answer here. Hey, blah. Oh. That was at the same time as the Boris Johnson thing blew up, the Partygate, remember? Yeah. Both of them blew up at the same time. She said, well, there's nothing to go. But just before that, she'd hammered the wee boy, went up back and forth to get his eyesight checked. Remember him? That worked for Boris Johnson? The guy that got his books. got sacked. The advisor, the Mr. Man in the Tory government, you remember him?
Yeah.
He went on a 200-mile round trip to Durham, and he was then hauled over the coals by Farrell. Starmer just said, "Hey, there's no case to answer." But you got to say, well, why is there a case to answer for the, I can't remember his bloody name, but that guy. Okay, he got my nose. I didn't like him, but I said, well, there's no justice here. Not only that, after all that was said and done, and she said, "Starmer, no case to answer," blah blah blah. She then said, "We don't do retrospective punishments here from Durham, you know. We don't do that. If people are out of line with COVID, we're not going back. We're not going to." 2 weeks later, she pulls in 2 people for breach of COVID, all at about the same time, and they get fined, heavily fined. You say, well, hang on a minute. But there was a very eminent professor wrote an article about it, and I posted a bit of that with my blog tonight, and he makes it very clear that Farrell is a political animal. What she did was that, under pressure from whoever it was, she said to Starmer and Farrell, "You're okay, you're fine. You've got no case to answer, no matter whether it's a videotape and but other people she hammers." And not only that, you actually look at it and dig in deeper, as I did on that particular Beergate, because that's what they call it now. It was widely reported all over the press. Beergate. They choose to ignore it up here at the time of our interview. I chose to address it again and have a look at it. In terms of the Beergate thing, 3 weeks. The investigation took 2 months. The first investigation, she came up and said, "Nah, no problem." 3 weeks before the announcement, right out of the blue, for no apparent reason, the Durham Police Authority, controlled by the Labour Party, announced a contract extension for Joe Farrell for 3 years. Told without any, there's been no precedence for that until then. So she got an extension of her contract for 3 years, and her existing contract hadn't even expired. They extended it 3 weeks before that decision went out. So therefore, you've got to say to yourself, you made a decision based on what? Getting a promotion out of it? Did you get an extension? £550,000 contract, that's the extension. So all hell was let loose in Durham about that. The local councillors in Durham, who are not best pleased with the way she handled things in Durham, they start to write and say, "Hang on a minute here, why are you getting a contract extension?" Then 3 weeks later, you come up with this magic decision about Starmer. So that's on my blog. Now, what I hope to do is to stimulate in the minds of some thoughts that perhaps they should have a closer look at things. They should have a look at the incident with Farrell and the Rathband. But not only that, what upset me with the Rathband thing is the family lost case on a technicality. You know what the judge said? The judge said Joe Farrell had no responsibility to any policeman that's on duty. He takes his chances. That's what the bloody judge said. So a policeman, member of the public, has got a right. A policeman has not. The fact that if he'd been shot dead, make no odds to the judge. The judge made it very clear Joe Farrell had no responsibility to tell the policeman anything. It's up to the policeman to take care of himself. That's what he said. And then that same judgment, that same day, he said to the family, "Well, by the way, you could pay the police costs of £100,000 today. That day, pay it. If you walk into the bloody court, you either go to jail or you pay the 100,000. Fortunately, they had the money always set aside. Durham Police Authority were reimbursed all the money, £100,000. But that wasn't the end of it. The eventual sum, the final sum, which came through over a period of the next year, £200,000, the family were made to pay in costs to to Durham. Now, for me, that's wrong. That's hopelessly wrong. I may be barking up trees. I do that often, but I'm quite happy to bark up this tree for as long as I can. Because when you add in beer parks, and then you add to that the nonsense with Joe Farrell over the PC draft ban, and you add in other ones that I haven't even written about yet, but they're in the pipeline, such as taking the car, taking the boy away from his duty. He was the only policeman in the whole of the south of Scotland on mobile patrol that night. She took him away. She left the whole bloody area without any form of cover whatsoever. The other driver, there were two drivers. The other driver was available. He was in Fife in Dundee. That's where he covered. There was no driver covering the worst area, which is Aberdeen, where I live. The bloody wind blew my bloody house down here, the floods and all sorts. And she's away south. Not only that, she's a part-time person. She was at Weber Station at 4 o'clock, waiting for a train. How the hell was that? Because the announcement went out from the police authority, her own bloody authority, that there were no trains. And yet we have this copy story that she went there at 4 o'clock to get a train. So there's much more to that needs to be teased out as well. Because it's not acceptable for me as a taxpayer to pay this woman £255,000 a year, total gross cost £800,000 a year, all that money, and she then sods off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday to go home to her family. Yeah. Now, when you balance that against the boy who just retired, I had a lot of time for him, but at the same time, he made his mistakes. But Livingston was an honest cop, and when he worked, he did his duty 24 hours a day. He was in Scotland, and you could call him at any time. That was the word I get back from his college. Any time, day or night, you call him, he's there. You can't call her after 4 o'clock on a Friday. She's a part-time police constable. So these are the areas that I'm looking at now, because I've only got a short time to pursue it, because of course we have the imminent police cuts that are about to come, 1,500 jobs. I know what she's going to do. I know exactly what she's going to do. She's going to do in Scotland what she did in Durham, not because she thought it up, but because it's this guy that thought it up. And of course, this guy is heavily involved with the Labour Party, this assistant chief constable, because he was at the Beergate thing with Starbuck and Farrell and Rayner. So there's a lot going on there. Yeah. Plus of that, I still don't know who the hell she is. I don't know anything about her before 2002. I've checked Cambridgeshire, I've checked Alderich, I can't find her. I even checked bloody Ancestry, I couldn't find her on that. I find people that are named Farrell, but
Well, what is it you think she's got to hide?
I don't know.
Okay.
And that's why I'm intrigued. If you read my blog, you know what I'm like. If somebody's got something to say, hey, I'll keep digging until I find out what it is. And you say, why do you do that? I said, well, because I just feel compelled to do it. And if someone's going to come to my house and stay with me, I need to know about them. And effectively, and her coming to Scotland, she's coming to my house. She's going to stay with me. She's making decisions that will affect my life. And I need to know who she is. And from what I've gathered so far, from what I've pulled together so far, it doesn't make easy reading. It makes me uneasy. Why does she not reveal who the hell she is? Is she Mrs. Farrell or is she Miss Farrell?
Is that really important? I mean, that's her personal life. Does that matter?
Yeah, she has no personal life. She has no right to personal life.
Really?
No. A public servant of that seniority, gifted with that power, has no right to a personal life, which excludes information the public should know. The reason I say that is because she's put it online. I am Joe Farrell.
Yeah.
Wikipedia. Okay. I am Joe Farrell. My parents were called Farrell. That's the implication of what she's saying. Is that true? Or isn't it? Do you take her at her word? I don't. Yeah. That's why I write my blog.
Yeah. Okay. Before we finish this conversation, I mean, could I ask you about, a little bit about the Alba Party and your views on
Yes.
that? Because I mean, I'm taking part in the internal elections, and that was part of the reason for setting up this.
Aye, that's all right. Carry on.
Okay, well, one of my ideas, for example, is to at the moment the NEC of the Alba Party is only half of it is directly elected by the whole membership, and the other half is only elected by so-called conference delegates, but those are actually people who have just paid money to go to the conference. So it's like an extra premium to take part in those elections. And I think the whole NEC should be directly elected. Is that something you would agree
I
with?
think he changed the rule, did it?
Sorry?
Did not change the rules?
Yeah, I think the rules should be changed to allow. Sorry?
I understand he's changed them, but
Who
that's
is
no
this?
longer changed.
Who's changed the rules?
Alex Allen, from what I'm told.
Oh, well, I mean, I certainly haven't heard that, but I maybe what you heard is that the elections are being rerun because they took place a few weeks ago and now they're being rerun. But to the best of my knowledge, the rules are not going to be changed. So that's one of the reasons I'm standing, is to try and put this idea forward.
Uh,
Well, what do you think about the general direction of the Alba Party? Are you happy with it?
I'm not happy that there's not been any breakthrough.
Okay.
I'm not happy that there are no young ones. If you actually look at the conference,
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
they're sort of over 50, over 60, and what's the
that was one of the younger people there, which was quite unusual for me. Yes,
the SNP are the same at the
that's
moment.
true. Yeah, it's not just an Alba problem.
The politics in Scotland have lost the young generation.
But there's a paradox, isn't there? Because it's young people predominantly who support independence, or older people disproportionately support the union or whatever you want to call it. Whereas, but in terms of active independence activists or people who go to conferences, it is heavily skewed towards older people, and that's a paradox I've never fully understood. I suppose it just must be cultural.
That's something that needs to be addressed and addressed urgently, because the SNP are afflicted by the same problem at the present time. Now, I wonder, have the young ones been disenfranchised? Has the walkie-talkie thing, has that affected it? Has that impacted on it? What's going on?
Well, I thought young people would have been predominantly attracted to identity politics, and well, certainly if social media is any guide, young people are very passionate about it.
My grandchildren think I'm a Luddite.
I'm sure, yeah.
I can't accept what they accept.
Yeah,
perhaps that's the problem. The arguments against what's happening within the SNP and the agenda that they've been forward is perhaps one that's disenfranchising young ones all over the shop. And there's a polarization of young activists who predominantly
LGBT, yeah.
They're in favour of that. They support that. But I believe that if they do, there's probably a small minority, but I could be wrong. But
well, I mean,
two grandchildren, they do support it. They think I'm wrong.
Well, as you said, though, I mean, it's a problem that afflicts both Alba and the SNP, and yet Alba and the SNP, at least in terms of the leaderships, are on opposite sides of the fence. So you would think if that was the issue, then young people would be attracted to one party or the other. But I think it's more of a sort of cultural issue that, sort of younger people are less likely to get involved unless they're interested in a career. And of course, the young people who do get involved, well, I don't want to generalize. It's totally unfair of me to generalize, but a lot of them are career driven, where I suppose it's the older people who are there because they really believe in this stuff.
We need to get them, certainly before the next general election, we need to get them back on board. And I'd like to see much more effort being put into encourage. I know we do have a young group, but they don't have very high profile at the present time, do they? The young ones within it all.
Well, yeah. Well, there's certainly, they make they make themselves felt. They make themselves felt on social media. I've certainly been aware of them. Yeah, and I think obviously there's been if you have a limited number of young people, you have to do that. You have to push them to the fore, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. And they are very visible, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. But so for Alba, for me, the disappointing thing about having made this breakthrough, I keep hoping it's only going to take one breakthrough somewhere to get into the top bracket of the returns on some local election or whatever. But running at 2 and 3%,
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I mean, are you not encouraged by the Ash Regan defection, because that could be the start of a kind of snowball effect?
Yeah, I'm thinking the terrible thoughts, isn't it? I'm thinking maybe Alex should stand down.
Oh well, that's almost heresy, isn't it? Is anybody ever going to?
I think you should
allow that to be said.
I'm thinking of that. I'm not saying it out loud to you. I'm thinking tactically, it's only tactics, that no matter what's happened, Alex has been tainted by what's gone on, and it's very sad. And I'm just wondering if Ken McCaskill is too old for the job in terms of that, and so is the other boy. That maybe Ash Regan, maybe young, redhead, very photogenic. Maybe she would be the one to be better placed to front Alba and have Alba have Harrick obviously still there, but maybe in a more senior advisory chairman type role. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think this is another paradox, because it's always pointed out to me, that Alex Salmond has terrible personal ratings, but I just feel that when you're a small party, the fatal thing is to be starved of attention, and the one thing that Alex Salmond guarantees is attention. And there's a huge risk that if he steps down, does Ash Regan have enough of a profile? Does she have enough of a grounding with the media? Do they think if she's enough of a star that a party led by Ash Regan is a party worth paying any attention to, or does that just kill the whole thing stone dead? Maybe this is the best of both worlds, because she will be to the fore as the Hollywood leader, and so they can use that quite a bit, and but still have Alex Salmond as the figurehead to sort of. So this is a big hitter, a really important person in recent Scottish and UK politics, and this is what makes the Alba Party relevant. And so maybe that's the best of both worlds, as long as they can make it more collegiate, make it more, make Ash Regan a really important person. I think Neil Hanvey is very impressive. I mean, you said that Kenny McCaskill was too old. I don't think Kenny McCaskill is too old, but Neil Hanvey is.
I was certainly impressed with his presentation at Westminster the other day, when he and McNeill had a go at the boy, the wee Tory boy opposite, and destroyed him every time he opened his mouth. But the disappointing thing, of course, there was a brilliant speech, brilliant arguments, but where the hell were the SNP? Again, there's no SNP there. Terrible, just walked out.
But I mean, this is the importance of Alba, isn't it? Though, because if the SNP neglects certain things, then Alba can at least, even if we're not making a breakthrough, which hopefully we will, there is that relevance for Alba that we can sort of fill that breach when the SNP refuse to do things.
An interesting development tonight that's been the buttons are being pushed over McNeill up in the Isles, that as to whether the SNP should put someone up against them in the next general election or not. And and we had before what's the boy? What's his name again? I've opposite names off the top of my head. It's the son of Brickor, Hamilton. One Hamilton. Whether the pastor, I've opposite names off the top of my head. But he's fallen out with the SNP leadership recent times. He's up in that area, and he's saying that the SNP tonight. He said the SNP should not put a candidate up against him. They should let him stand on his own, unopposed, in the Isles. because to do that, putting a candidate against him, there's a danger that the Labour Party then could get into that seat for the first time in 75, 80 years.
Well, it was 2005. The Labour held the seat between 1987 and 2005 with Callum MacDonald.
Yeah,
and that's the problem with the Western Isles, because once somebody gets in, you know, yeah, in 1987, you know, Donald Stewart had been the MP for the Western Isles for 17 years. It was a rock solid, it looked like a rock solid SNP seat, and I think it was the biggest swing in the 1987 election by far. And it wasn't because there was a nationwide swing from the SNP to Labour. It was actually in the other direction. But you know, must have been a very local, positive campaign by Callum MacDonald. And once he was in, he was very difficult to get rid of, and he was there for what, 18 years. So if you muck about in a seat like that, and if Torquil Crichton, who's the Labour candidate, gets in, you know, he could be there for the rest of his life, literally. You know, so you know, this is not a situation to muck around in. I would be very surprised if the SNP give Angus MacNeil a free run, because you know there's kind of personalities, there's egos involved, and it's very difficult if Angus MacNeil, you know, leaves the SNP. You know, why should the SNP give him a free run? That would be the argument. But well, the answer to that is pretty simple, because the consequences would be disastrous. And I think sometimes you just have to, you know, be the bigger person in the room. And actually, if I could give a precedent for that, if anybody from the SNP is listening, you know, in the late 1980s, there was obviously the disastrous merger between the Liberals and the SDP.
Oh, I love that. I remember.
And, so there were 3 SDP MPs who refused to join the new party. They refused to join the Liberal Democrats. Those were, if I remember rightly, those were David Owen, Rosie Barnes, and John Cartwright, I think that's his name. And amazingly, you know, in spite of all that acrimony, the Liberal Democrats did not put up candidates against the 2 of those 3 who stood in the 1992 election. They stood down, and those 2 candidates came very, very close to winning their seats, even though the SDP had imploded by then, even though they didn't have an organisation. But because the Liberal Democrats were the bigger person in the room, allowed them a free run, they very, very nearly held on. And I think that's the lesson that the SNP should learn, because Angus MacNeil could hold the seat if the SNP give him a free run. Well, hopefully he could hold the seat anyway, but he's certainly got a better chance if they give him a free run. But if they don't give him a free run, you could potentially add it to Labour, and you might never ever get it back. So you've got to really put emotion to one side and think about what is in the best interests of the Scottish independence movement, and also the Western Isles. Do you want to lumber the Western Isles with a Labour MP for potentially decades? You know.
So you think that they'll ignore them? What's she name again? She won Hamilton. I was in Hamilton at that time when she won it.
She won Hamilton.
Way back. Winnie
Ewing. Winnie Ewing. Well, she died recently.
It's her son.
Oh, Fergus Ewing.
He's the one that's, he's the one that proposed this tonight. He's gone online and told them, he said, look, we shouldn't put a candidate up against these people.
Well, I suppose the problem now is that, I mean, Fergus Ewing is so unpopular with the SNP leadership, they'll probably do the complete opposite at once. But yeah.
What they're going to do with him, they're going to drive him out. Like he'll leave the party, then you'll cross the floor and join Ash Reagan. That would be a
it's so difficult, isn't it? Because you know, if you think back to March with the SNP leadership election, it was a very small margin between Kate Forbes and Humza Yousaf winning. And we know that there are several thousand people in the Alba party, and a lot of them were probably previously members of the SNP. And yet, if those people had stayed in the SNP, and I'm not, I'm not saying they should have done. I'm certainly not saying they should have done, because apart from anything else, nobody could have foreseen that situation. But I did worry that did that swing the balance. I don't think it did. I had a look at the figures and I thought, well, there would have been, if you think about those people who are now in Alba, not all of them would have been in the SNP if they hadn't joined Alba. Some of them would have just not been in any party at all. Some of them, amazing though it may sound, would have ranked Humza Yousaf ahead of Kate Forbes, and that would have cancelled some of it out. Some of them would have abstained. So having looked at the figures, I convinced myself that, of course, can't be sure, but probably Kate Forbes would have lost anyway. But, you know, there is that dilemma for any person who is in the SNP thinking about joining Alba. You know, is the better use of my political energy being in Alba, or is there just that possibility that by staying in the SNP I could win back the party, you know, win back and probably there isn't. Probably the sensible thing would be to join Alba, but I think it's just really difficult to advise people because there is that dilemma, and it's not totally straightforward. I'm a member of the Alba Party. I'm running for office in the Alba Party, and of course I want people to join the Alba Party, but it's just, you know, as grown-ups we can recognize there is a dilemma and it's not totally straightforward.
How do you think the SNP are doing at the time? They seem to be turning the corner according to the polls.
Well, it's very interesting. There were two polls today, and the Ipsos poll was much better for the SNP than most of the polls we've seen recently. But the Redfield and Wilton poll was really poor for the SNP. You know, it had Labour ahead for the first time in the Redfield and Wilton poll. And that must be, you know, in all seriousness, that must be quite difficult for the SNP because, you know, strategically, what do you do when there is one poll telling you that you're actually in a decent enough position and another poll telling you that you are facing potential oblivion? Because although the Labour lead is small, well, I mean, there are two things about that. The voting system works against the SNP because, you know, it works in their favour if they're way ahead, but once it gets close, because of the way their vote is spread and because Labour's vote is more concentrated, it's always going to work in Labour's favour. So a 2-point lead is a significant disadvantage for the SNP. So that's one problem. The other problem is that momentum and the fact that UK general elections are a sort of an away fixture for the SNP. They're not going to get the coverage on UK media. So, you know, you can almost say a 2-point lead, if you start with that for Labour, could that be a 7, 10, 15-point lead by the time you get to polling day? And if that happens, and I think that is entirely possible, unfortunately, I don't, you know, I'm not in the SNP, but I want them to win the election because they're a pro-independence party. You know, I think that's entirely possible, and you could end up with the SNP being reduced to 1 or 2 seats. I mean, they have no. I don't think they have any real idea of just how bad it could be. They're still thinking, "Oh, will we win the election or not?" It's probably more like how catastrophically are they going to lose the election by, and will they ever recover from it? And I don't think they quite realize they might be in that position.
You think it's as bad as that?
Well, I do. I mean, if we were talking about a Holyrood election, I don't think it would be as bad as that, and I think the SNP would be favourites to win. But in a Westminster election, I think the SNP have forgotten that just how big a disadvantage they're at Westminster elections. And once it goes, I mean, 2017, I don't think people even considered the possibility that the SNP would be reduced to below, 45 seats, and the shock of being reduced to 35. I mean, first past the post magnifies everything. You can go from 35 to 2 very easily. I mean, the shock. I mean, you can imagine the shock of 35 seats in 2017 if they were reduced to 2 or 3 seats, which is possible. Would the independence movement ever recover? And this is a problem for all of us. I mean, there's no point being sort of looking on from Alba and thinking, well, that's the SNP's problem. It's a problem for all of us, because if the media decide that the independence cause is killed by the SNP losing heavily the general election, that's a problem for all of us. And there's a problem, that extends to Alba, and we should not be should not be cheerleading for some kind of SNP disaster. Obviously we want, if we stand as candidates, we want to do as well as possible, but we do not want Labour and the Conservatives to win seats. We want pro-independence candidates to win the seats.
Do you think the Tories will get back in?
like the Rishi Sunak, do you think he'll get re-elected? No, I don't think so. I think we're looking at probably quite a heavy Labour victory UK wide.
But do you think that the Labour victory is going to be achieved with Starmer in force? He seems to be a weak link in the organisation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree that he's he's not an impressive figure, and he's
like Gordon Brown, isn't he? Really?
Well, yeah, but he's also, he should be unpopular because of the amount of U-turns he's made, and there should be question marks over his integrity. But you've got to look at the polls and say he is not unpopular with the public, and he's not setting the heather alight, but in the new Redfield and Wilton poll, even among Scottish voters, he has a slightly positive net approval rating of +1 compared to Humza Yousaf, who is, I can't remember what the figure was today, but it was well into the red. He was well into negative territory. So I mean, it may be baffling to us, but if you present the public with a choice between Keir Starmer and Humza Yousaf, the Scottish people apparently at the moment would choose Keir Starmer, and that's yet another disadvantage for the SNP going into this election.
I think that for me, at the present time, the politics is in a mess in Scotland and in England, and it's, for me, it's an opportunity for Alba to push and try and break a breakthrough. But the question is, how do we do it?
Well, what I would say about the general election is that the kind of sweet spot here is to concentrate your fire on the 2 seats that Alba currently holds, which is East Lothian and Kirkcaldy Cowdenbeath. And because it's a first past the post election, you can detract from your campaigns in those 2 seats by spreading your resources too thinly. So if you stand, hypothetically, as some people want to do, I don't think this will happen, but hypothetically, some people want to stand in every single constituency. If you do that, you could be spreading all the activists and all the resources across 50 odd constituencies where you could be concentrating them in those 2 constituencies. If you got good results in those 2 constituencies, not necessarily holding the seats, although it would be brilliant if we did, but if you could get really respectable results, maybe a strong second place, that's the way to get Alba on the map. And the general election is the only way to do it, because first past the post elections are really tough. The real opportunity is in the proportional representation elections. So I think we have to be sensible in the general election. Concentrate our fire on those 2 seats, not try and split the vote elsewhere, and avoid the harm of getting the SNP saying, "Oh well, Alba were Labour's little helpers and the Tories' little helpers, and those seats would have been won by the SNP if Alba hadn't intervened." Regardless of whether that's true or not, it could create a kind of mythology. So if you can get good results in 2 seats, avoid causing any harm to the party elsewhere by splitting the vote, then that's as good as we can do, really, I think, in the general election. Then we move forward to the real opportunity,
I agree with
2026. Yeah,
I don't agree with the scattergun approach. I agree with it that you need to zero in on that which you can hold.
Yeah,
you fight hard and move the finance and move the resources into that area, and see if we can do something holding them, usually, or at least proving that as a party we are a viable force.
Yeah,
because the election that follows is the one that's important, isn't it? When is that? 18 months after next election?
Well, yeah. I mean, if the general election is next May, which it might be, then it would be exactly 2 years later. So it would be in May 2026.
Unless, of course, the SNP decide to cut and run, call an election.
Well, I mean, we should be delighted if they do, because everybody has been asking them, for a de facto referendum by calling an early Scottish Parliament election, but they will never do that. And
and say we'll be bound by the outcome of that in terms of independence.
Yeah,
but it's not my reading of the treaty. It's not for England to decide how we take the decision to remove ourselves from the treaty. It's not for them to see how we do it. We must have a referendum. Must do it. Not for them to do that. We would dictate to them how they do it. I'm saying they did. If England did want to withdraw from the treaty, how would they do it? Would they have a referendum? I don't think so. They would just have a meeting in Parliament and say, well, the majority counts.
I think I always worry about these sort of legalistic arguments, because I think ultimately, if you went to a court with it, what they would say is, well, the successor parliament to the Scottish Parliament is the UK Parliament. So if you want the successor to the Scottish participant in the treaty, that is the UK Parliament. So if you want to know how the Scottish party to that treaty gets out of the treaty, then you just need the UK Parliament to vote in favour of it. I think what we have to do is win a mandate. That's what the SNP are running away from. I mean, we do not have the ability to break the union without some sort of cooperation. But what we do have the ability to do is get a mandate for independence. And this is what I cannot understand why the SNP are running away from. In a way, it's like I'm sort of in the middle. There are people who want to unilaterally declare independence, but on the other extreme, there's people in the SNP, which is the majority position, certainly among the leadership, who just don't even want a mandate for independence. They want to try and get a mandate for independence. I mean, this, I thought we were moving towards some sort of, relatively sensible position when Humza Yousaf gave his speech a few months ago, and it sounded like he was sort of saying, well, we'll continue with the de facto referendum, but we'll just not call it that, and we will just say that, a majority of seats would be enough. And then it was watered down even further, and they say, well, we might, if this doesn't get us anywhere, well, we might think about using the 2026 election as de facto referendum. I mean, at least if you're going to do that, at least say it definitely would be. But it's like, oh God, I mean, it's just kicking the can down the road ever going to end. It's just, it was just so dismaying what the SNP came up with at their conference.
I don't hold any hope for the SNP giving up their salaries and their perks. I think that's a road that they've travelled down too far now to give that up, which is why they've abandoned independence as the driving force behind the political party. The question is, Alba hasn't gone down that road, so we're still, as I believe, committed to independence. I think the SNP, maybe not all of it, but certainly the people that are in the various positions around the country, they're picking up around £40 million a year from the tax coffers. What the independents are doing, asking them to give that up.
Yeah, and I suppose if you get into those people's heads, you could sort of see. I mean, it's frustrating for us, but I mean, if you've got a career and if you're quite comfortable in Westminster and if you're relatively young, you would think, well, if we actually become an independent country, I mean, maybe I'll lose this career, maybe I wouldn't get into the Scottish Parliament. And I suppose I think there's a degree of timidity because they think that chasing independence might cost them votes, might cost them their seats. But I think the reverse is true, and I think they'll look back, after what may be a very disastrous general election, look back and think, why did we soft pedal on independence? Why did we demotivate the independent supporters who, that's why we were there. We got there in 2015 because people were so enthused by the 2014 independence referendum campaign. Why did we throw that precious resource away? They convinced themselves that caution will always win votes and seats, and the reverse is true, but they genuinely believe that, I think.
I remember I sat and watched the telly that day when the boys stood up. What's his name? The guy who runs the comedy club down in Glasgow.
Tommy Shepherd.
And said, "Oh, we're not here to cause any troubles, Mr. Speaker. We're going to be good boys and girls.
Yeah, that's good.
Obey the law." And but I'm saying, what the hell? I almost threw my bloody shoe at the television. I said, no. We declare independence. We just tell them we're walking out. Don't go. So walk out.
Well, even on a more basic level, I mean, one of the things that John Bercow pulled the SNP up on when they got the large number of seats in 2015, the SNP were very sensibly applauding rather than saying, here. And, even on a very basic level, if they had just stuck to their guns on that, the Westminster Parliament might actually have matured slightly and might have done everybody a favour, because it actually isn't that strange to applaud rather than say, and so it might help to drag the Parliament into the 21st century. But and it's this kind of double standard, because applauding is fine in the House of Commons as long as it's kind of in certain situations, and if Conservatives and Labour applaud because there's a kind of landmark speech, and this does happen. John Bercow would never have stopped that, but because it's a kind of third party doing it, oh well, he can't have that. We can't have these jocks doing that. So it's a real double standard.
I still don't understand why the SNP attend the House of Commons and sit there for all, some of them sit for bloody hours. Why for me, they should do what they do the politicians in Sinn Féin do. They should sign up for everything that goes, but don't attend Parliament. Just don't go. Of course, they don't achieve anything.
I think it's harder because Sinn Féin have a very committed voter base. I think it's a harder sell for the SNP because they would, and the same is true for Neil Hamby and Kenny McCaskill. If you say we're gonna, if their opponents say, oh, you're standing for election, but you're not going to do your job, that's a very telling attack line. However, what I do think is that abstentionism has to be on the table as a mechanism for enforcing a mandate. You get the mandate for independence first, and then once that mandate is absolutely unambiguous, then you say, well, we'd have to take steps. If Westminster are going to play ball, then we have to take steps to enforce that mandate as best we can. And abstentionism is a possibility then, because if Scottish MPs, if the bulk of them withdraw from the House of Commons, there is then a crisis of legitimacy, because you can't have like one of the four countries of the Union, and and they are not really represented in the Parliament of the Union. That is a crisis of legitimacy that has to be resolved one way or the other, and that might be a way of bringing the UK government to the negotiating table. So I would say you can't do it until you have the mandate for independence, but absolutely that has to be a strategic option once you do have that mandate.
The thing is, how do you get the mandate? I mean, how they did it in Northern Ireland, of course, in the 1918, I think it was, all the post offices had a chart, and the people went and signed it.
Well, I mean, the mandate for Irish independence, if you look at Irish historians and what the Irish political experts say, no question, the mandate for independence was derived from the 1918 UK general election in Ireland, which Sinn Féin won handsomely. So this is a puzzle about the SNP's reluctance to. I mean, I think we're hung up on they got hung up on the phrase de facto referendum. It's simply using an election to gain a mandate for what you put in your manifesto. And if you put in that's what every party does. And if what you put in your manifesto is we're seeking an outright mandate for independence, you can put a whole lot of other things in your manifesto as well, incidentally. The idea that a de facto referendum has to be in a one-line manifesto, that's ridiculous. But if the manifesto clearly states that we're seeking an outright mandate for independence, and if you win a clear mandate, I think there's actually some debate among Irish historians about the quality of the 1918 mandate, because I'm not sure if Sinn Féin actually won a majority of the votes, because the problem was that there were some seats that were uncontested, and so there's that slight ambiguity. But certainly if the SNP and the Greens and Alba went into a UK general election or a Scottish Parliament election saying they wanted an outright mandate for independence, since they won a majority of the popular vote between them, and then they withdraw from Westminster, I think that is a genuine crisis of legitimacy.
Do you think Humes will go down that road? Will he actually?
No, I don't think Humes will do anything. It's very difficult. I suppose the task for Alba is to, well, one possible way that Alba could contribute to bringing independence about is to panic the SNP by taking just enough votes away that they think, well, we have to get these votes back, and the only way we're going to get these votes back is by being Alba, by turning ourselves into a more radical party. Just once they get to the point where the SNP's careers are threatened, then maybe they might actually do the sensible thing. So that's one way Alba could do it. The other way Alba could do it, in my opinion, would be to do well enough in terms of seats at the 2026 Hollywood election that they would actually hold the balance of power, and then they could actually do trade with the SNP. And I think that would be a very interesting situation, because the SNP, as much as they dislike Alba and hate Alba, are they really going to say to their members, we're going to go into an accommodation with Labour to avoid having to do any deal, even an informal deal with Alba? I don't think their supporters, their members, would stand for that.
So you think that between now and then we would hope to attract some more MPs, MSPs across the floor?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I remember, just after the 2021 election, we were told that if Alba had won seats, if you'd had a group of Alba MSPs, like maybe 5, 6, 7, led by Alex Salmond, then you would immediately, there were 3 SNP MSPs who would have immediately joined, and that would have been such a moment of drama, and it might really have been a big turning point. And of course, it's understandable they didn't do it, because you can't really, Alba having failed in that election, it's going to look really odd if you do that. But and probably wouldn't be very good for your career either. But I mean, I don't know if Ash Regan was one of those 3 people, but I don't think it's totally wild to suggest she might have been. And that's fascinating, because I would not have, if I tried to guess who those 3 people were, I don't think Ash Regan would have been on that list, because I don't think we really knew her views. We knew her views about the trans issue, and I knew that she was in favor of criminalizing not criminalizing prostitution, but criminalizing the sale of sex. This like Swedish model where you criminalize the sale of sex, but you don't criminalize the seller. I think she's very passionate about that. I don't agree with her about that, but that's one thing she was known for. I had no idea that she was such an admirer of Alex Salmond, and that she was possibly one of the defectors to Alba. So the question is, who are the other 2 people? Because they must still be there. We don't know who they are. We can speculate, but maybe they would be complete surprises as well. But the fact that there were 3 people who were contemplating in 2021, I think, should give us hope that there may be 1 or 2 more defections before this Parliament is out, and that could make a big difference.
You make it maybe Mary Black will cross the floor.
If Mary Black crosses the floor, she would go to the Green Party or to the Labour Party. She would get, I mean, that thought occurred to me. That you could, in my sort of darker moments, I wondered if Mary Black might do a Lisa Cameron and actually join a unionist party. But I think if she ever joined another party, it would probably be the Greens.
The Greens. I'm interested to see. I see that Mary, is it McCallum, that she's gone off to that COP28 with a boy, Coombs.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, why not?
I've been interested trip with both of them, with his record,
I have no idea what you're suggesting there.
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying I'd be interested in his record.
Mary McCallum's a very talented traditional musician. I was sure when she entered politics, I was sure I had seen her at Celtic Connections. I'm pretty sure I did. But that's so I actually knew who she was, and I wonder if she's has any regrets about the fact that she's now known for being a very loyalist minister rather than known for being an extremely talented traditional musician. But I suppose
I was surprised that she didn't join Alba.
Mary McCallum. Well, as far as I know, she's quite a leadership loyalist, isn't she? Or are we thinking about 2 different people?
I'm thinking the lassie that's now she got transport remit now. Did she take on transport?
All right, let me just double check so we know we're talking about.
She talks about the A9 at the moment.
I'm pretty sure we're talking about the same person, but she would never have joined the Alba Party. She's
singing Gaelic or Rod Scott?
Mary McCallan is a Scottish politician serving as Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Just Transition since 2023, having previously served as Minister for Environment, Biodiversity and Land Reform. Is that the person you mean?
She lives in a farm with some guy, I think some nearby Carluke, I think.
Is that another investigation for Calton Jock?
No, I think she's lovely girl, and I think she's very honest and very upfront. But I just wonder how long she'll be able to stand being in a party that's as badly organised as the SNP. Maybe I'm wrong about her, but that's
I think as far as I know, she's very much a leadership loyalist. I could see her sort of sticking with it through thick and thin because I wouldn't call her a careerist, but
I don't. I think he's a careerist. What about Kate Forbes now?
Well, there's a conviction politician. I mean, she took a big risk. She took a big risk by being the sort of change candidate who was going after Hamza. And I suppose time will tell whether it pays off for her, because we're sort of still in the as they say about the French Revolution, it's too early to tell, because if the SNP really do fail badly at the general election, she's positioned herself as the ideal person to take. Obviously, if you want a change candidate, then Kate Forbes is that person. But the problem is, by holding off until then, is it worth? Is what you inherit actually worth inheriting? And I think I do worry that maybe she should have. Maybe there would never have been a way of dislodging Hamza before the general election. But I think, if the SNP were going to be saved, then I may be wrong, but throughout the leadership election and since the leadership election, my strong hunch has been that Kate Forbes, has a bit of the X factor, and I think in the way that Nicola Sturgeon used to have, she was the person, and that if you had presented her to the public at a general election, I think I could have imagined her getting into UK-wide leadership debates and really being a star. And I just think it's, apart from all the sort of factionalism of the SNP and the the identity politics stuff, and people saying, oh God, we've been saved from evangelical Christians, and if people had just put that to one side and just thought about how are we going to win this election, I think Kate Forbes was the person to do it, and she still is the person to do it. But I don't think they're going to change leader before.
And what about a return? What about the return of Nicola? Is that a possibility? If Humes steps down?
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, because she certainly hasn't stepped back from the public spotlight, so she must have some plan, whether it's to get back to her old job, or whether it's something else. Maybe she still wants a big job elsewhere, or maybe she imagines herself doing what David Cameron has done and coming back in a sort of lesser ministerial position. I mean, she probably, the fact that she's still doing the self-publicity, I think, she doesn't do that for no reason. She must know what her plan is.
May go with the UN. She's certainly close to Clinton, isn't she?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to get a job at the UN if there's any sort of legal cloud hanging over you, which I suppose is still the case.
Do you think she'll take a Dame Hood if she gets nominated to go to Westminster and Lady Nicola?
Well, it's two different things, isn't it? Dame Hood is the equivalent of knighthood, but she can't become a member of the House of Lords because the SNP policy opposes that. Although interestingly, Plaid Cymru take seats in the Lords, and I've actually said in the past, oh God, it's probably a controversial thing for me to say, but I can't really see the argument against it. I mean, if you may as well take the seats in.
Some benefit. There might be some benefit to be gained from having seats in the Lords.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like a sort of point of principle, but I think the benefits might outweigh the disadvantages. It's not a huge benefit to being there, but you might as well be there. Well, what's the harm, really?
Everybody else is there, cutting your throat. Yeah. Maybe send us south as a right. Well, I better let you go.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for coming on. You rescued my podcast. Thank you very much. So, hope you have a good night.
Have you? Goodbye.
Bye.